How are you actually supposed to do that? How are you actually supposed to give the okay to take your child off the ventilator? I first met Zariah when she was 3 months old, when she was transferred to the NICU I worked at as a nurse from another facility. She stole my heart within the first day I took care of her, and it soon became clear that she was going to be coming into foster care. Her parents rarely visited, and she had very, very high needs. One of the doctors made a comment that they thought that she would be there forever, like before they would be able to find a foster home for her. And I just knew in the deepest part of my soul that I could not let that happen. It took a few weeks to get my husband on board, but eventually he really felt like this was something we were supposed to do as well. When she was 6 months old, we finally got paperwork saying that we were her official foster parents. Now, it was several more months before we were finally able to bring her home, but we visited her all the time, and my husband had to learn all of her medical care, and he is so squeamish, but he learned how to take care of her trach, her G-tube, and all of those things, and he just loved her so much. He absolutely adored her. It also took time to get home health nursing set up, and that was something that was required by the ENT before we could take her home. So a couple weeks after her first birthday, we were finally able to take her home. At this point, her case goal was already adoption. She had only had one visit with her biological mother the entire time she had been in foster care. And within 2 to 3 months of her being in our home, both parents signed consent for the adoption. So on April 6th of 2021, we became her full legal parents. That was one of the happiest days of my life, but what I didn't know is that, oh gosh, sorry, this hurts me. What I didn't know is that things were soon gonna change a lot, and my happiness was gonna be short-lived. The month after her adoption, she had her first seizure. We knew she was high risk due to one of her brain abnormalities. She had schizencephaly. She was hospitalized twice before we finally found medication that could keep her seizures under control. But she did have some mild brain damage from the incident. So she wasn't her smiley, goofy self, really. She still recognized us, recognized our voices, but she was just so weak. And both of those hospital stays were really traumatic for her. She would cry anytime someone entered the room that she didn't recognize at the hospital. She would even cry when I first came into the room until she saw that it was me. The nurses stopped even coming in to see if I needed water or anything like that because she would just immediately start crying. So a couple weeks after her hospitalizations for the seizures, she came down with a respiratory virus. And technically, we were supposed to bring her in. If her oxygen requirement was more than 2 liters, she had a trach, but it was an airway issue. It was not a lung issue. So she was not on a ventilator. She was finally feeling a little bit better, so we did go ahead and bring her on vacation with us. We had 2 other kids placed with us at the time, both of whom are adopted now. She was still kind of weak, but she was able to do it all, and she slept well and all of that stuff, and everything went great. But that night was the first time she had really, truly started acting like herself since the seizures. She was super happy and smiley and giggling and starting to move around and wiggle more. The next morning, I got up and went to work, and the home health nurse did show up that day. But my husband had already planned on working from home just in case. In the middle of the day, my husband decided he was going to go get a Walmart pickup. Zariah was happy and smiling on the couch, and he said goodbye to her and kissed her goodbye. And he had no idea that that would be the last time he would see her smile. I'm in the middle of my shift, and I get a call. And I usually don't answer phone calls at work. And they told me that Zariah was in cardiac arrest, and that nothing that they were doing was working, and I needed to get there as soon as possible, and they would keep doing CPR until I got there. And my supervisor offers to drive me home. And right as we get into her car, I get another phone call that said that they were able to resuscitate her and that they were bringing her to the hospital where I was actually at. But me being a nurse, with the knowledge that I still know that she's not going to be okay, that she's still probably not going to survive this, and even if she does, she will never be the same. I could barely get myself to look at her almost lifeless body laying there because it just didn't seem real. She was fine when I left that morning. I didn't even go to her room to give her a goodbye kiss because I was running behind. I didn't give her goodbye kisses every morning, but I did a lot. So on June 6th, we made the decision. Yeah, even in the days leading up to it, part of me wanted to change my mind. I don't know, you hear all these miracle stories, and I'm educated. I know that that's really was not going to happen. But I was praying a lot. Because how are you actually supposed to do that? How are you actually supposed to give the okay to take your child off the ventilator? But on July 6th, the day that we had said we were going to remove life support, her vitals started going down, and she was getting to a point where she wasn't really stable anymore. And I had told them that I didn't want them to take the trach out at first. I just wanted them to remove the ventilator because that's what really killed her. So at first it looked like she was going to pass really quickly. Then they said, why don't we play some of her favorite music? And her favorite movie was Frozen 2. And so I turned on Frozen 2. And I guess nobody told me this at the time, but whenever we started playing that soundtrack, her vitals jumped up again.
It's Daddy!
Sorry. So she was breathing ever so slightly. And eventually we did have to remove the trach. And then it looked like she was going to pass really quickly after we did that. And then she started abdominal breathing through her stoma. So there are so many moments where we thought this was it. And then it wasn't. But it ended up the 2-hour mark. She had to pass within 2 hours to donate her organs. And the 2-hour mark hit and she was still not gone yet, which was so hard. And so then they wheeled us back up to the room in the PICU. And then at this point, since they didn't need the arterial line to be monitoring her anymore, and they took up, and all they had on were the leads, I could pick her up fully. So I picked her up and held her close. And then within a couple minutes, she passed. I still, things do get easier with time, but this is still really hard for me to tell because every time I tell this story, it's just like everything comes flooding back. And I had heard from people that year 2 is actually harder than year 1 because the reality of the situation really sinks in. And I think that's true because I think I was numb for a lot of year 1 and I could tell this story without getting emotional, but it's almost impossible for me to do here now, even 3 years later.
Wow.